All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. This is, well, the Discord server for the School of Video Game Audio. You can find us online at SoVGA.com. And I'm joined today by Brigitte, and she has done a lot of work in the game space, but even more stuff outside of the game space, which she can talk to you about as well. But we'll be focusing on like her work in working on different games like uh, working with League of Legends, working with an independent game called Fractor, and so we'll look through her compositional process. And the nice thing is that we can do a chat with her, a Q&A. And so what we'll do, as far as the format, is that we'll start out with 15 minutes of her doing a presentation. And then once that's done, we'll sort of morph into me asking some questions, and then also I'll be looking into the live event chat. And from there, you can ask questions to Brigitte directly, and we'll just continue with that and for probably until about an hour-ish from now. So yeah, please, take it away, Brigitte.
Mm. Hi, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me to participate this time around, Leonard. Yeah, so I'm just gonna give a quick sort of recap of the whole how I ended up here in 15 minutes. Make it as quick, short, and sweet as possible. So yeah, my name is Brigitte Dajczer. I have an artist pseudonym which is Briga, Briga, and I started off basically as a classically trained violinist. I did my classical studies. I finished them when I was 14, and I kind of had this like breakthrough moment when I was a kid where I was just like, yeah, I really like music, but I really don't dig this direction in my life. And I had a bit of a cognitive dissonance where I was like told that you could only play the violin if you played it a certain way and it had to be the classical way. And if it wasn't that, it was just going to be like, well, you're not a musician. And so I quit. I didn't continue my studies in the post-secondary realm for violin. I just quit and I started playing in punk rock bands and I started exploring my relationship to sound. Sound, music. I mean, music is sound. Sound is music. I mean, all of these factors. So I began my exploration in my teens, and yeah, I played in some all girl bands. I played also. I started experimenting with playing different instruments. I was just like really sort of game to like. I lied. I said I played the bass because it had four strings, but it wasn't the same thing. But then they bought me a bass, and then I played in the. So it was a lot of like. I didn't get to keep the bass, by the way, but there was a lot of just kind of moving around and being really, really open to what the universe would bring me. And I call that pretty much like a creative playtime. And it's funny because at that age, I didn't know that it was like playtime. I was just really kind of sincerely, going with the flow and all that stuff. Um, when I had to choose where to study, I decided to go study at an art school, the Alberta College of Art and Design, which is now called the Alberta University of the Arts. And it's pretty much in the same leagues as Emily Carr for those who are in Vancouver, or OCAD, which is in Ontario, or NASCAD, which is in Nova Scotia. So I did my bachelor's of fine arts there, and I pretty much majored in drawing and video. And back in those days, I explored with analog video. There was like a A-roll, B-roll suite with like an actual analog board that you could like do cross dissolves and stuff like that. And again, I started exploring with sound because I mean, all I did was play music. I played in these bands and I wanted to bring those two worlds together. So I was very much composing music without even knowing I was composing music, just making music and making it mutually non-exclusive with image and just exploring like this world that I could create. And then from there, I moved to Montreal. I went to do my master's in Montreal at the Concordia University. And same thing happened. I was doing open media. So I was working a lot in video and I had a lot of friends that were coding and programming. It wasn't something that I was, into. It was on my radar, but I hadn't fully understood the extent of the importance of it until now. And, that led to basically playing in a lot of live bands, a lot of different music from all around the world, a lot of tours, touring around the world, playing the violin, and, at the same time, making music for independent filmmakers, and it just kinda all led up to, a few years ago when I met the La Hacienda team, which is a studio run by Brian D'Oliveira. Like, he's a composer, who did, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. and they got me on board. They just really liked this kind of free flowing sort of uh, experimentation that I'm very much into, as well as the fact that I come from a very rigorous regimented training. So, I mean, yeah, I can sit down and play in an orchestra. I can read my parts, like I'm a session musician. I'm part of the Musicians Guild. Like, so that part of me still exists, and I still nurture it. But I can also just come in and let's talk textures, let's talk elements, let's talk in complete abstractions, and let's make music that way. And that's kind of what happens when you work on a game, and that's where I'm going to segue into the games that I've worked on. So the very, very first game I got to work on was Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is I'm consider myself really, really lucky that oops, I'm doing a AAA game, like, that's just not normal. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And, I'll be honest and totally transparent, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't much of a gamer. I'm getting into it now a lot more, and I'll share the games that I like with you guys afterwards. But yeah, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you know, it's a AAA game, and it's a commitment. For Brian, it was a 3.5-year commitment. And, as I'm speaking now from his perspective, as being a lead composer, if this is your first triple game, I think you need to understand that you need to have a team. It doesn't matter if you tell yourself, "Oh, we have 3 years and it's gonna be, like, we're gonna take it slow. I'm gonna, like, dialogue it out with the audio director. We're gonna, like, you know, it's just at one point, the project, the repetitiveness of that getting into that constantly, your ideas become tired or old, or you become worn down, and there is a lot of burnout in the game industry. So, Brian was really smart. I learned a lot from working with him, as him in a leadership role, and one of the biggest things was that he understood that he didn't wanna stop the momentum of, doing other work on at the same time as Shadow of the Tomb Raider, but he also understood he probably couldn't take on that work. So what he ended up doing is getting a few satellite composers like myself, and we got to build our portfolios. So I did some TV
Mm.
shows that he couldn't do, and so I was doing that, and that was totally different styles of music. And then whenever he needed string arrangements or a string player, he'd just call me over to the other studio, and I'd just head over, and we'd start cracking at it. So. Um, and also, what's really fun too is again I come back to the team element. I really, especially in television and gaming, the turnaround is so quick, the pressure and the demand is so high that, like, it doesn't take much to sort of make one individual crack, especially if they feel like they're carrying the weight of the world. So he surrounded himself with people that could come in and give him a breath of fresh air, who weren't totally attached to the project because, I'm just coming in, it's just like, "Do you think this is a good idea? This is," like, so we're bouncing off of each other. And, yeah, and I had the pleasure to work on a game and get the credit for the game, which helped me build a portfolio for my work. So I also got to see the process of, like, what you do to deliver for a AAA game. I will just specify in the section of, like, from composer to audio director, this was, for Eidos with, Rob Bridget, the audio director.
Oh, yeah, Rob.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So, and I mean, so I don't know, once it got into Rob's team's hands, like that's, I'm not aware of that process, but our process was still intrinsic on, a workflow. It was very important to have an efficient workflow. Sometimes, the workflow was challenged because the actual work maybe wasn't meeting the audio director's needs. So there was a lot of, you could fall in love with a piece, and then you have to, like, and you find out it doesn't pass the cut. There's like a revision, and it's like a pretty harsh revision, and you have to, like, start all over. So there's a lot of that going on. um, but also you're kind of not aware of the rudiments of implementation in gaming, or like how to, I mean, I was just basically doing cinematics. I included a link uh, in the chat. So it's basically it's the manner, and that's pretty much just all me doing string arrangements and playing around. So that's kind of the section of the game that's I occupy the most space where you could get a sense
Mhm.
of my ideas and my influence that I was bringing to the game. But yeah, so I was pretty protected from a lot of other stuff. Um, yeah, exactly. So anyways, Shadow of the Tomb Raider finished, and as a studio, we moved on to other things, and, Brian asked me if I wanted to be a lead composer on my first game, and I was like, "Oh my god, yeah, totally." And so there was an indie company called 4L Games who had this, like, wonderful kind of iOS, like, iPad, like, Android game, which is kind of like, un it's very much influenced by Monument Valley.
Mhm.
It's a puzzle game with a little girl, female character who kind of explores, different worlds um, and yeah, so it's a puzzle game. And so Fracture, I went from being on a fairly large team to actually just basically the sound designer and I. It was about it, just the 2 of us. And it really, really opened it was a completely different process. This
Mm.
is the thing is that it was, like, so different from Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So, with Fracture, it was, like, basically Mark and I and I'd sit down next to him. He was on Wise, and we were looking, at the game, and we're on Slack communicating with the team in Toronto. And it'd be like, okay, we need to do. We have a tiny budget, and they're asking us for 15 minutes of music. And I think that the budget was so low that
Mhm.
like for 15 minutes of music, it would have come to like uh f- I think there was 7 levels. It would have come to like 50 cents or 1 minute per
Yeah.
$1 per minute. It was like for
Mhm.
the two of us, which would be 50 cents.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it was crazy. So it was just kind of like we were like, how do we give them something really awesome for and not put too much time into it?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
like, and I think that in the indie game world, this is like, yeah, you're thrown into like, Shadow of the Tomb Raider was like, here's all the money, oh, you charge me whatever you want, I'm going in as a session player, here's some guild fees, like everything's cool, take your time, we'll pay for your time, and then now it's just like, yeah, we have like $5 budget and make it
Mhm.
good, and you wanna make it good. I mean, we really believed in the game, and I'm very proud of the game. Um, so basically, after lots of brainstorming and troubleshooting, we came up with the idea that we couldn't make gameplay music that loops. It just would take too much time, and it would become very repetitive, especially if someone's not solving the puzzle, and it's just like, they couldn't afford that.
Mhm.
So we decided to attribute sounds to objects in the game. And that because in the game, the character has to like trigger certain objects and she uses these objects to like place them in different places and then you solve the puzzle and you go into the next level. It's like walking into a sculpture installation. It was the idea that you could walk in and you could like, do this sound, this sound, this sound, and you're actually making your own music
Hmm.
as the player. So it becomes much more.
Mhm. Oh.
So in order to do this, um, well, we had to now visualize certain keys.
Mhm.
Like, what key is this level in? What key is this? How do we transition from level 1, which is in the key of F, to level 2, which is in the key of A, And that there would be this kind of small cinematic section. So I would, write something that was more ambient. It could be atonal. Atonal is like the ginger in the sushi. It just kind of clears out the flavor between bites.
Exactly. Palette cleanser,
you know,
yes.
yeah, that's it. When in doubt, go atonal for a palate cleanser.
Mhm.
Or it could be tonal where we're using, like, pretty much, like, traditional music theory to sort of, modulate from one section to the next. But it was so much fun. It was so much fun to explore sounds, to make the sounds musical, the violins in there, there's, like, plenty of stuff in there, so, like, for example, if I brought my violin.
Oh. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah, surprise, surprise.
Yes.
So, there was, like, some creepy segments, so we could be using harmonics, but it would be like or it could be, we could get really abstract or
Mhm.
So it's just a whole palette of sounds, but it's not just the violin, it's, like, really any other instrument that we could get our hands on.
Nice.
Um,
What other instruments
yeah.
did you use?
For Fracture,
Mm-hmm.
we did a lot of hang drums, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of hang drums, a lot of bells. Um, strings were used for the ending and the beginning of a level when she accomplishes or enters a new level.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kinda like a stinger that says, "Congratulations," "You made it to the next level."
Mm-hmm.
There was also, some percussive instruments like those frogs that you can go
Yep. Mm-hmm.
you know? Yeah, so we didn't go too crazy. You do wanna choose a palette of instruments that kind of has a nice cohesion and that works well together, so that it doesn't feel too disjointed for the player, but,
Mm-hmm.
it was and we solved the problem. We were able to sort of limit the hours of work. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean we're being lazy, we're just being smart about how we're working, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, limit the hours of work, also come up with a really cool idea of music, which is like well, it's totally interactive music,
Mm-hmm.
it's dynamic in that sense, and, keep it interesting for the player, yeah, you can find that game on Steam. It's, even Apple Music, I think, or whatever, iTunes or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
And then it won an award,
So
yeah?
yeah, I did, and I forgot what award
Yeah, I know. I forgot too.
Okay, wait a minute. No, 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 it's the European Game Awards, best,
Okay.
sound design.
Oh,
Yeah, and
perfect.
what
Oh.
year? 2018, I think. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but, that was really wonderful.
Nice.
I'm gonna quickly plow forward to LOL.
Mm-hmm.
So, League of Legends, that was a pretty fun I would say that was probably the most musical sorta gig that I've had up until now. So, it started off with, in 2019, again at the La Hacienda Studios with Brian D'Oliveira. Brian was asked to record the Kiana Empress of the Elements, champion theme. So, Brian is very, very strong with rhythm and more like, indigenous sounds, and so he had already started playing, he laid down a pretty solid bed of tracks. He had a melody in mind. Again, a totally different process, sometimes there's a melody, sometimes there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I came in and, I got to pretty much play to image, which is improvising to image. So I came in with my violin, and the same thing with Kin of the Stainblade. I just came in with my violin, and, at that point with Kiana, what was interesting is he had the, like, boom, 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 and it really needed that support with the strings,
Mm-hmm.
which I'll give you an example.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
And now we're talking we really delved into earth elements like, fire, ice, wind, rain, earth, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So with Kiana, we had this part at the beginning where before she starts flying into the air and showing all her skills, there's this kind of grounding element to her. So it was just like adding to the percussion, like, and as it builds, you know, at
Mm-hmm.
one point when she starts doing all her moves and, then it's like really kind of whirlwinds of elements like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you're getting kind of more into an ephemeral sound, like runs with the strings and same with King of the Stainblade. There's just the part where he's fighting the demon,
Mm-hmm.
the darkness within himself. And, it's really, when he leaps up into the air, like, it's like we spoke about this, like, whirlwind of wind coming in and what we can do, with strings to sort of emulate that and bring that in there. So, yeah, and again, a completely different, approach, whereas Fracture was about sort of abstracting
Mm-hmm.
sound and taking music and abstracting it, but, rendering it playable and recognizable to the player. The League of Legends games, well, these are cinematics, I should specify, not gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
but, they were so much more about pushing forward concepts like I said, whirlwind, fire, earth, water, whatever you can find. So in this situation, some people have asked me in the past, like, Oh, so you must be thinking, "Oh, this is like a minor 7 chord that you're gonna play."
Mm,
And it's, like,
yeah.
not necessarily the case. I'm not thinking that way, there is I will admit there is one character in Kin of the Stained Blade where I was like, "That dude is a minor 7 flat 5," but that was, like, kind of more of a joke with the piano player who was the only guy who would get my joke, so it was super
Mhm.
nerdy.
Mhm.
But no, I like I like exploring music in a way that it's just it transcends all that.
Mhm.
Sometimes, I don't even think in a key signature. I mean, and I think with Fracture in the cinematics, the atonal parts, you just start getting into exploring textures and space. Um, you're trying to hear it like you would see something.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, yeah, anyways, I think that's
Wow.
it. Brings us to here now.
Yeah, very cool. I think what we can well, I'll finish up some thoughts here. I took some notes, and so yeah,
Mhm,
I've Rob is a contact of mine, and so yeah, they've been in the industry for a while, and yeah, it's interesting to see how a lot of creative types have landed in Montreal, including yourself. And so, I guess one of the
mhm,
things when starting out and also like moving, I guess how do you find that Montreal sort of like informs your practice and sort of like what your basically what your career is primarily, I guess, for the folks here in games.
mhm. Well, so I grew up in Calgary, and my undergraduate studies were in Calgary, and the Alberta University for the Arts is a really amazing school. The city has changed a lot since I left. I left in 2001. I moved to Montreal in 2001, so I've been here for literally like a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Calgary, I think I never felt like I belonged. I always
Mm-hmm.
kind of felt at that period we're talking about the '90s here, so
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it's completely changed as a city, it's much better now. But back then, I just felt, yeah, I couldn't be myself, and I had found art, and I use art as a very general term, really anything creative. Um, and so I was really dying to get out. It was like
Mm-hmm.
just like really, really excited and wanting to sort of explore new territories. And I felt that in Calgary at that period of time, it was pretty conservative, and the idea of like pushing the envelope was pretty much just playing the violin in a Greek band, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
did. So it was just kind of that it stopped there. I was born in Montreal. My
Mm-hmm.
mom is Quebecoise.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a code permanent, which is basically
Mm-hmm.
I could I looked at the option of getting out by doing my master's degree in Montreal, and I would be paying in province fees. It was a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of a practical. It was a way to be like, okay, I can totally do this huge life changing move in hopes to sort of find my creative tribe and discover more people
Mm-hmm.
and like more processes and just share and so I took that opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and I just when I moved here, I was like, "I'm never going back," you know?
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, back then in 2001, like, I wasn't looking to get into the game industry. I was
Yeah.
really just looking for creativity in its purest form.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things for like, for students that can be interesting is that, there's, with the school, we have people from all around the globe. There's been people from over 50 different countries come and join us. And a common question, for people starting out is like, well, I happen to live, either on the east coast of the US, or I live in India, or I live in like New Zealand. And they're curious on like how to get into the industry. And it seems like you sort of did that, move to basically expand your options, not necessarily to go specifically for a job. So I think that that might be
Yeah,
a good, sort of basically it's sort of like a becoming yourself kind of move. It's just like, yeah, I
yeah,
feel more, me in this place. And I think that, work is one thing, but then also like finding community and connection and like meaning in a space is also like really important too. And for me, I live in Vancouver, and I find that's good for me here. I have a lot of, like professional options here for game audio stuff if I were to continue with that. Most of my stuff is done online now because I focus on, on the school, but I also do work
Mm,
in indie games from time to time, and I'm working on one now. And so
awesome.
yeah, we'll see how that, sort of the shift moves around with like, people wanting to, you know work remotely. And I guess
Yeah.
that's something interesting too, because you've been working with La Hacienda a lot with the game side of things, and hopefully with your credits you'll be able to branch out. And I guess that's a question for you, like how do you see, because with Fractor, oddly enough, they were like, local as far as like Toronto, but
Yeah.
you worked with them remotely. And I know that when I was
Yep.
working on a game like
Mhm.
an independent game called Retro City Rampage, the developer was here in Vancouver, but like we spent most of our time, yeah, like just, whatever, doing stuff over basically like Skype, and we would meet sometimes for lunch, but most of it was done sort of, like online, lots of emails and stuff like that, sending ideas back and forth. So yeah, how do you find, like, what do you think the possibilities, not just for yourself but also for others, might be, like, with this sort of pandemic shift and stuff like that? Do you think that things will change a lot, or do you think that, sort of job opportunities will sort of be the same, like you need to be in a place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that with the reopening, and if this is really the light at the end of the tunnel, and we globally things become more stable,
Hmm.
I think that there'll be a little bit of a rebalancing where some people are going to go back to work, probably by choice, or maybe they don't have a choice. But the notion of remote work is finally going to be established as legitimate. So I say that because I've been doing a lot of remote work since like 2016. Like
Hmm.
if I wasn't on tour, I was here in the studio delivering audio assets, music to whomever, especially I have a client in New York City where I've been doing a lot of ad work, ad music, and I met them once because I went to New York City to go to a party, but
Hmm.
literally, like, I actually never really met them in person, and, like, they found me through my online presence, and then we started dialoguing, through email, and we just hit it off, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
so I do like, and I know I used to tell people, "Yeah, I'm delivering." "Oh, you're working at home." That was the term before the pandemic.
Yes.
"You're working at home. Oh, isn't that cute?"
Yeah.
And now I I kind of feel like now it's like, no, it's remote work, and it's totally legit, and you know what?
Yeah.
If you and it also depends too on your role. I mean, I'm a freelancer, and I'm like been in situations where studios were like, "We would prefer it if you come work on this project, like a contract project, here with us." And
Hmm.
those were studios obviously in the same city as me, and I was more than happy to do so because you are entering another space, another creative vibe. So it's like I can understand why they would need that. And there's other situations where it's like, you know what? Just send us this stuff.
Hmm.
Here's the requirements, and like deliver it like this, and we need it by this date, and then you do, and then oh, we need a revision, so you send them a V2, a V3. Maybe if you're unlucky, you make it to a V7 or whatever,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter. Like so yeah. All this to say that I'm flexible to both.
Hmm.
And it's really always just been about dialoguing with the person, your client or
Hmm.
whomever, and that you just kind of where you're at, what you need, they know where they're at, what they need, and you, like, figure out if you can work it out together or not. But I think there will be a bit of a rebalancing where, the workforce will kinda shift back to working at the office, but not everyone. I think that the remote thing is gonna stay because it's now finally been established as legitimate, Yeah.
Hmm. Cool. Well, let's have some look at some questions. Thanks for everybody joining us. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I'm going to switch a little bit over here to the live event chat thing. And yes, you can ask questions now. I know that there's a few people here. So feel free to go into the live event chat and you can ask your, whatever you'd like of Brigitte. So, yeah, it's question period. And seeing as I don't see any yet, there's like I keep getting notifications of people like popping in, and okay, so here we got one from James coming in. It's gonna be a hot potato. Okay. So James asks, what are some of your favorite ways to keep inspired and curious in composing music and or creating sound design? So how do you stay inspired and curious?
I definitely think, going out and socializing. I know this sounds super lame, but it's, connecting with people, connecting with other people or,
Hmm.
experiences. Um, it's really surprising, when you get to if you're lucky enough that you get to travel, if you're privileged enough that you get to travel, go on tour, and meet other musicians and other artists and composers, conversations and sharing conversations and listening to other people's music and listening to other people's, like, audio work is extremely it's beneficial. I just can't live in a vacuum. I just can't,
Hmm.
if I'm living in a vacuum at one point, like we say in French, "Je tourne en rond dans ma tête." I just start, like, feedback looping in my head. Yeah, that's it, and it's
Hmm.
just so, with the pandemic, because obviously I was not touring and I didn't really get to,
Hmm.
like, go hang out with friends and stuff. One of the things that I started doing is I started, calling people on the phone. It was, like, super weird, but I was just like, I feel like hearing people's voices, like, I know
Hmm.
all this, like, texting, and I just was doing too much screen time, and so I
Yeah.
started doing long walks and, like, walking and, like,
Me
listening
too.
to music on Spotify, yeah, and then sometimes I go for a walk and I just, like, pick somebody and, like, just, like, almost cold call them because, like, we're
Mm.
friends, but we just text. I just,
Yeah.
like I'd be like, "Hi, how's it going?" And they're like, "Good." I'm like, "I'm calling you because I wanna hear your voice." They're like, "Okay." I'm like, "Come on, we can do this,"
Hmm.
So, yeah, so anything not digital.
Yeah, I think that's good. And so maybe I'll
Yeah.
push that question a bit and say, like, say if
Mhm.
you've been working on something for a long time and this is sort of the writer's block scenario, like when you get
Yeah.
stuck, how do you get unstuck?
Mhm. Um, sometimes a forced, like, weekend away from the studio, away from my gear, away from everything, and then, like, it feels forced at first because 'cause you're just like, "No, I can't afford to do this. I'm gonna,
Hmm.
like, I have a deadline on Monday, ah,"
They don't call it a
but,
deadline for nothing.
yeah, exactly.
Ah.
But, yeah, oh, no, it's all that, but,
Mhm.
no, and then there's this kind of, like, withdrawal phase where you're forced by whatever, your partner, your family, your friends to, like, go away and do whatever with them,
Mhm.
and then after the withdrawal, so there's that. That's a big one for sure.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think, like, I don't know if that answers the
No, I
question,
think
but
that's good. It's like basically like take a break and also, yeah, connect with people, in human form. I do that similarly as well during the pandemic times. Like I said, I'm gonna go for lunch later, in human form, like, with a friend of mine and eat food and take our time and sit outside in the sun and like, not try and schedule things too much and just sort of allow things to flow. And also he's a music guy too, so it'll be, we'll be chatting, businessy type stuff. But yeah, it's important to, like you're saying, in a sense, sort of find your group of people that
Mhm.
you're inspired by creatively, and yeah, seek that out. And yeah, I think, no, that's a great answer. So I'll go to the next question here. Okay. So Anthony asks, how has your composition background informed slash influenced your sound design, and vice versa? Ooh, nice. And we can
Yeah, it's a good
continue to
one.
ask questions as well for the people that
Mhm.
are in the chat here. Keep asking questions in the live chat. Feel free to ask tons of questions. Hmm.
That's a super good question because, when I was working on Fractor, at one point, we had, another composer come in, and he did a degree in composition,
Hmm.
and he was very, like, he was super, super strong at, like, choir orchestration and, like, arrangements, and he wrote everything out, and he was deeply embedded, or I'm gonna start using the word indoctrinated because I'm gonna
Yeah.
use that for myself as well. He was deeply indoctrinated in a certain, form of or approach of composition. Um, for me, the indoctrination that I had, like, it stopped when I was a teenager because I left the conservatory when I was a teenager. In my bachelor's and my master's, I actually didn't study composition in that sense. I was just naturally doing it and being I was lucky enough to be hired to do it, and it was just, it was I mean, I had the background, but I, like, didn't continue the schooling into my adult life.
Mm,
So the indoctrination was actually very much undone when I was a teenager playing in punk rock bands, because in these punk rock bands, you had a bunch of kids that had no musical background, completely opposite from me, who were
mhm,
doing stuff by ear. No one could write music. So it's not like I'd be like, I don't get that chord. I couldn't have that conversation. And it forced me to also work on my memory. And it forced me to like learn to decipher stuff just by ear. And, you know, any music that sort of addresses, like, supports or professes anti-establishment, you kinda
mhm,
wanna get away from the note and you wanna get into the texture of the sound. And so I had this opportunity without knowing it to sort of break down and deconstruct a form of indoctrination that I myself was had been formed into. So to answer your question, I feel like, another thing too, going to art school and studying sound art and sound artists and electroacoustics and all that kind of stuff. Again, it went further to undo any sort of like deeply ingrained like classical bias or or harmonic bias. Um, that being said, yeah, in the sound design, I guess like I have a tendency. I'm currently working on a project where, I'm sampling I like sampling a lot of real sounds. I like to go organic. And
mhm,
then once I capture the sounds, and I'm in my DAW, I'm like maybe adding certain sort of like elements of like virtual instruments or synthesis or use sampled instruments. I might add a little bit of that to add the multiple layers and so that the sound is original. But I guess, where my composer side informs my sound designer side is more, the fact that I will go search for capturing natural organic sounds and wanting to then transform them instead of maybe working from the other way, which would be like, you're taking sound libraries or samples from sound libraries that you've acquired through your practice, and maybe you're using more of like serum, or you're like trying to get more into that trailer sound effect, like, so there's that. And of course, like for Fractor, I wanted every level to be in a key signature. It didn't
mhm,
mean that there had to be melody and harmony, that's not it. It's just that when we were, like, hitting the table, we were making sure it was an F. We would,
mhm,
like, pitch it to F, you know what I mean? Like,
mhm.
we'd make sure it was F. So, you can pitch, sounds to better suit your needs, and you can look at sounds as instruments, right? So I guess it influences me that way. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, my background is in electroacoustics. That's my undergrad. Basically, I have an extended music minor, and then I also did a lot of programming stuff. And combining those two things, I did a fair amount at university. I have a master's as well, and like the key point, as far as like the unlearning side, is like that's a real process for people that do the sort of classic whatever university route. And in game
Yeah,
audio, like you might have found that there's a lot of people that haven't gone that way, that they're
yeah,
self-taught more so. And
mhm,
I really find that both of those approaches are really valuable to have, like where you come at something like learning on your own and you sort of build things up over time, versus like being handed this like whatever body of like history of like whatever music and sound from a particular viewpoint. Like we live in
yeah,
you and I live in
Western
Canada, so
centric.
we come
Yeah,
very Western at things, and that's one of the things that's
mhm,
interesting for you probably working with Brian. I believe he's Venezuelan, but from South America,
mhm,
and so like
mhm,
there's definitely a big cultural difference there as far as like whatever academia. Like there's a
yeah,
different culture and a different history, and so people will apply different backgrounds. And I really that's one of the things that I love about the school, is like to mix all those things together. And so
mhm,
when working with students, sometimes it can be tricky because, like, it's like you first need to learn it to unlearn it. So you have
yeah.
like, like on the opposite end of things, like I know people that, they're on the art school, and, there was somebody that's just like, hey, I just took paint and, sprayed it all around just how I felt like it. And I created this new thing. And it's just like the teacher was like, well, no, that's like abstract expressionism. Like there's certain categories that things fall into, but then also when you have all that training, then to break those mental like boxes can take years. and it can
Yeah,
be a
for
real
sure.
process. So with the school, what I try to do is I try to approach things sort of in a little bit of a medium. So I really like the idea of, like learning through practice, but then also having a certain amount of like structure to hang things off of as well. Which actually, that's a question that I should ask you, is that because you've worked with the school a bit, how do you find that the school, working with me slash the school, has informed your process?
Oh, it's actually really been cool.
Cool.
So I took the WISE course, and I completed the WISE course, at the beginning of 2020, and I'm currently actually in the Unity course. And, so one of the cool things for me was that, uh, obviously, people identify me as obviously being a musician and a composer, which is true. But I took those 2 courses, especially WISE. I decided to take WISE after I did the
Mm,
Fracture game, because just watching Mark work and seeing how he had to sort of take my information and fit it into the game, and seeing how sometimes I'd give him stuff and he would just be like, "No, man, it's not gonna work."
mm-hmm,
You know what I mean? And, like, that it was so alien to me. It was, like, such a different way of thinking, and so talking about deconstructing your own indoctrination is that all of the things that I have to offer to the gaming world, like, and to the game audio world, it's like, I know they're wonderful strengths, and it's part of the diversity of trying to bring creative people together. But I felt like I needed to educate myself about the other side. Like, I know I'm not gonna become a coder or programmer, like, it's gonna take me a lifetime of work, and I have a lot of strengths already, but the least I could do, I feel, out of respect for the creative process is educate myself a little bit about a different way of thinking. I found, wise eventually, I at some point near the end of the course, I understood it. I and not that was a while ago. I probably understand it less because it's not so fresh.
mm,
Um, C sharp is like my brain hurts, and, like, there's
yeah.
days where I step away and I'm like, "Oh my god, why am I doing this?" But you know what? It's so necessary. It's so easy. The human brain and the human being, it's all we want is to find comfort and hold on to it,
Mm-hmm,
and, like, find the sweets and just suckle on them, and it's like,
mm-hmm,
not be challenged. Like, the human brain is always just trying to trick you into thinking you're super great and you don't have to do
yep.
anything else ever again, and so for me, like, the School of Video Game Audio has been a place where I can go on my own time. That's another thing, I really appreciate the flexibility because as a freelancer, sometimes I have crazy rushes and then I have nothing, so I've been able to sort of put the course on hold and take it at my time, while I'm working. And there's been a nice understanding and flexibility in regards to my needs. And then I'm still, it's harder when I get back into it, but I kinda like it because it's, like, not a crash course. I feel like I could learn
Mm,
very quickly and forget very quickly, and if I have to revisit something after being off for 3 months where you just feel like, "Wow, did I really learn any of the" you know, like,
mm-hmm.
it's a really excellent exercise for the brain, and I just feel like it'll make me a better sound designer and a better composer and a better instrumentalist, really. I'm just a better person. I don't know. I'm hoping.
Yeah, no, that's very cool, and I think that yeah, with
Yeah.
someone that has as much obviously experience on the music side of things, like you say, you could stick with that, like
Mhm. Mhm.
for however long, and that could be your career, and you could survive and do that forever. But I think that the thing that I find really cool about people is like yourself is where you want to challenge yourself, and you're just like, yeah, I know there's one thing really well, but I'm like okay at like starting to crawl in a different
Yeah.
domain. But then those two things will come together. So I just thought like part of the way that I try to approach coding in the course is kind of like a bit like, like the punk rock style, where it's just like, look, basically here's some code, like throw it onto this and then see what sticks and then see what happens. And then I don't know, it doesn't work. And then, I can help out and say like, well, let's take this thing out and take this thing out. And then, hey, there we go. Similar to like just seeing what is possible with code rather than hopefully, like at the beginning, it can just seem like it's entirely daunting. It's like learning another language. But
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
like I really honor the fact that you're challenging yourself, as a creative person, and understanding that code and, basically the implementation side of game audio is super important for your process. And like, when you
Mhm.
started out, one of the major things is to basically give, like, to empower you as a creative so that you can speak that language when necessary and basically kind of
Yeah,
take the power back and say, like, no, actually, what you're saying there isn't entirely true. And I know that we can do this. Whereas if you don't
yeah,
know that side, it's like when, whatever, people start talking a different language, you don't have an into it, and then they make decisions for you.
yeah.
And so, like, I think that it's a great. I'm very happy that you joined us, and
Thank you.
I look forward to continue working with you. And I'm not wrapping it up here. I'm just saying, like, I just wanted to say that, yeah, it's very cool to have you part of us, because it can be challenging for professionals to basically say, like, I want to continue learning, and I don't know. Like, I would like to, expand my, reach into things that are uncomfortable for me. So let's see here. Okay, and then we've got a question from Michael. How did you develop your Oh, yeah, okay. And let me try again. How did you develop your compositional style slash sound? I'm having a hard time deciding what kind of. Oh man, how do I do this? What kind of, I guess, style to focus on? Sorry, Michael, the window's here and I'm not. Oh, there, here. I'm having a hard time deciding what kind of music to focus on. So how? Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's a tough question. I thought I found it, and I'm kinda going through what you're going through right now, Michael, but I'll I think I think in general, we pass through phases where we're lost, and then we're found. We're like, we think we found, and then, "Oh, shit, I lost it again," and, "Oh my god, I found it again,"
Yeah.
and it's, like, super elusive. But, I'm gonna go back to, like, I'm gonna go back to, developing my practices as a side woman, and performer, to answer your question. So, I was in a lost, but it was still found, when I was doing the whole punk rock, like, music thing, I I was found. I was enjoying doing that, and I wasn't necessarily searching for my voice, but I was really young. I was in, like, 15, 16 in my teens. Eventually I got approached by a Greek band, and they were like, "Hey, you play Hijaz scale," and I was like I was like, "Hijaz scale? What do you mean?" I thought they said jazz, and at the time, I was not very receptive to jazz, although I went to France and studied jazz. But anyways, I was like, "I don't play jazz," like, punk rock attitude. "What? How dare you tell me I play jazz? I play punk rock." No, and then they were saying Hijaz, and Hijaz is a makam if you start looking at, music from the East, right? Because I was indoctrinated in European Western music, right? Makam system is like an ancient system, and we go back to makams and shruti. Shruti system is
In India.
through India.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, so these guys were playing Rembetika, and Rembetika. Anyways, so I basically flowed from being invited to play in one group to another. And for me, before anything else, I saw it as a human connection element. So I learned how to play Greek music, Rembetika music, which is the music of a diaspora. There was a 1,000-year war between Turkey and Greece. At one point, it was a war based on religion. Surprise, surprise. And basically, the agreement between both countries, this is in the beginning of the 20th century, is that they agreed to ship off 1 million Greek Muslim people to Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, and then in exchange, the Turkish government was going to ship off 1 million Orthodox Turks to Athens, and then so you had a displacement of populations. You had massive poverty, homelessness. Pretty much what we're looking at with the Syrian refugee crisis
Mm.
that peaked in the news around between 2012 and 2015, 2016. So yeah, so the exchange of the population led to an exchange of culture, and then it became a music of the streets. So in Canada, in my little comfortable land, I was playing this music with some Greek people who had just moved. They were first generation Canadians, and they shared this music with me, which is a wonderful gift. And then from there, I basically started. I was invited when I moved to Montreal to play with a former Yugoslavian band. So we were looking now at the Bosnian War, the genocide that happened in. It's all about go take your history courses, kids. It's so worth it because music and culture are mutual and language are mutually non-exclusive. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're playing one, you better know about everything else because you can't extract music from its context. And this is a wonderful conundrum when you start getting into composing for image in games, but I'll put that aside. There's a whole other talk. Yeah, so I
Mm-hmm.
basically played in the former Yugoslavian band, and I learned about all the SoVGAs, that's and other music from that region. And then I learned about and at one point I asked myself the question, "Who am I? Like, what is my music? What is my sound?" So I was at the same place. I still am is you and your question. And so I started my project, which is Briga. It's a solo project, and it's really actually I call it like the world of Briga. You can just look up Briga music, and I'm just gonna uh, write that down. If you Google this, you'll basically find everything
Mm-hmm.
you need under that project. You'll find my Spotify. You'll find all that stuff. So I started. I collected all of these languages from around the world. Not just that, mindsets. And then I had to figure out. Well, I'm Montrealer. I live in Montreal. I've traveled the world, but I really am a Montrealer. And like, what is my sound? Who am I? So I started, writing music, and at first it was very much influenced by the sounds. It was almost like traditional folk music. It was very much influenced by the sounds that I had learned from the people that I played music with. I would say I just released my 5th album, which is called Territoire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Let me give you a second.
That's going in the chat too.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
So yeah. So, and I would say it's this is my 5th album. It's 13 years that my project exists, and I feel like this album is probably the closest to who I think I am. And it's a
Mm.
lot of, wild violin playing, and then, like, some pretty heavy bass lines in there, and there's a lot of, like, percussion from, my colleague that I collaborate with, Tak Farinas Kishu. His percussion is a very, very important part of my music. And Yeah, and I write in French and in English because those are the 2 languages that I was born with, that I
Mm-hmm.
learned. My father's Polish. I don't really speak Polish. I speak more more Serbo-Croatian than Polish, but
Mm.
I mean, I tried writing a little bit in Serbo-Croatian, but it just didn't feel right. And I'm just at a point where I'm like, French and English is great. I
Mm-hmm.
invite guests, so I acknowledge my community
Ah,
in the
yeah.
sense that, like, that's a really big one. It has
Mm-hmm.
it. So back to what I was saying, that mutually is not music is mutually non-exclusive from culture, language, community. It's just you
Mm-hmm.
can't create this stuff in a vacuum, and you can't say, I just wrote this and it's all me, because it's just like, no, it's like eating food, or like, in the sense that when you eat something, it becomes part of you. It's you, you know what I mean? And
Mm.
it's like when you hang out with people, they influence you, and it's just like, anyways. So yeah, so that's how I developed my sound as Briga. But just to quickly wrap up, I've been writing a lot of ad work, and advertising is all about make it sound like this, make it sound
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about don't make it sound like you, make it sound like somebody else, because we
I was
can't
gonna
afford to
ask.
pay them. So
Mm-hmm.
we
Yep.
can't afford to pay these artists. So we want you to rip off their ideas, and, like, but don't plagiarize, and, like, make it sound almost like this, but it's not you.
Mm.
Um and yeah, that can make me feel lost sometimes.
Yeah.
And yeah. It
Yeah.
can make me feel pretty lost. But my coping mechanism is just that at some point I have, like, they send me bids from time to time. I'm not full-time, and so it's
Mm-hmm.
back to kind of like avoiding a burnout by basically going for walks, listening to other music, talking to my friends, being reminded of who I am in my environment,
Mm-hmm.
and then it grounds me again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that I was going to ask you that question as a follow-up to
Yeah.
basically how do you bring authenticity to commercial work, basically, where you're not able to be fully creative and go like, hey, this is me, like when you're not commissioned to do things that are, basically within, your like existing
Mm.
sphere of what you normally do. It's just like, oh, hey, yeah, can you do this other thing? Yeah, and I guess you have answered that as far as like being able to cope with it, but like when you're in the process, how do you bring your own authenticity to commercial work? Like how are you able to sneak little bits and pieces in there where you're just like, huh, that's like, like whatever, the minor seventh flat five chord, where you're just like, I'm gonna quote like pre-existing stuff and just sneak it in there? Or are
Yeah.
you like, well, I'm gonna play, I don't know, I'm gonna play something different, like instead of playing violin, I'll put in more cello or something like this, like, basically try a different, like slightly different twist, or like, like or play, I don't know, maybe fiddle style or something, or you know what I
Yeah.
mean, like, are there ways that you like bend your process to make it so that on one hand it's authentic but it still fits within the box? Like, how do you work with that with commercial work?
Mm. So, up until now, I've viewed my commercial work or the opportunity to do commercial work as a stretching of my music vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. So, I mean, I'm comfortable, uh, in certain things, and, there's other things that I'm less comfortable, like, for example, creating dance music, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
like where you're working, with synths and whatever, beats, and all that stuff. I'd never really done that before, and it's not that, I'm like, "Hey, I'm not game to do this because I can't do this." It was just that I like the idea that there was a little bit of, anonymity in the sense that I'm being put up to the challenge. "Okay, can
Hmm.
you do this and make it sound similar to this?" So it's actually, really improved my production skills.
Okay.
Like, they've given me, yeah, like, on a big level, like, that's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing. The second thing is, like, the album Territoire that I mentioned, it actually influenced that album a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
in the production process, you know? It
Yep.
also, up until now, has made me feel like I can actually call myself a producer now. Like, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. I used to be, a composer, and I might have a team of technicians, or resources that would come to my needs if necessary. And then here's like, I'm doing the mix, I'm doing the mastering. And listen, I'm not saying because I'm doing it, I can do it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that. Mixing and mastering, that's an instrument in itself. Like every
Yeah.
special role, like, if I had a team of people that I could afford to like put through on this process, I would. If I had the budget,
Mm.
I would do it. But in situations like this where you're pitching a demo and you're hoping to get to, well, your demo gets wins the bid, it's forced me to sort of really expand my production skills and really consider like different tools, and again, get out of my mindset or my indoctrination.
Yeah.
I have lost myself in that work, from time to time, but I
Mm.
do. Maybe I'm lying to myself, but I think it's good when you're in a creative process to
Mm-hmm.
lose yourself. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to lose yourself. Um, and then you find yourself at the end, hopefully, or you don't, and you're screwed. But,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting too philosophical. I don't know if I've
No,
answered
I
the
think
question.
I think what I'll do
I
is
hope.
I'll try to loop that together, and then I think there
Okay.
might be other questions here. Let's have a look. See.
Okay.
Okay. No, 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 no. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So we're good for questions. To
Okay.
put
Awesome.
to sort of summarize that, I really liked how the way, I'll loop it to my process because I only know about me, but like with your process, the way I understand it is that doing the commercial work in an interesting way actually changes who you are as a craftsperson, like, like at a technical level.
Yeah.
And when you change that, it changes your chops for your own creative stuff. So you don't necessarily need to feed all your creative stuff into your commercial work and all your work and
That's
like
right.
wrap it all together and
Yeah.
say like,
That's right.
this is
Yeah.
me and it's only like from this direction. It's just like you can sort of shift that around and go like, yeah, well, this is me too. And the commercial side, it's all me. I do coding,
Yeah.
like I do production. I am a
Yeah.
violinist, and
Yeah.
I like to
Exactly,
do
exactly.
like, to get out of the house, like,
Go
and
for what?
yeah, exactly, like all those things. And it's interesting that, yeah, from, as far as like what you're saying on like how do you do music to begin with, is that the creative side of you, that's part of who you are, and that informs not only your technical process but also your creative process, because it's putting you into new spaces that you hadn't necessarily gone before and you wouldn't necessarily reach on your own. And
Mm,
yeah, to hear that you've done even more production work is great, because all of that stuff it'll continue to, similar with the coding stuff or implementation, it's like sort of like building, like bridges, or like building a larger sort of picture of something where, like the next time you work with a producer, if like you say, you want to collaborate with someone that way, that you'll
Mhm.
just have a much larger vocabulary and skill set to bridge that gap so that it'll become more, like together. And I think that to me, my own process, where I try to bring sound design, music stuff, coding, education, all these things together, is it's a constant, yeah, like learning process of like how how do like when I do those things, like you say, like getting lost is good, where you sort of you go out of your comfort zone, but then it's also
Mhm.
to come back into yourself too and go like, okay, like I'm not that 15-year-old person playing punk rock anymore, and like my
Yeah.
like you're saying, like your latest album is more who you are, but also who you are changes in time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I think that uh, the process of like working commercially is an interesting challenge that I'm sure that a lot of people that are listening to us right now have encountered. So let me just double check the chat because I think we're getting near to time.
Yeah.
Okay, so yep, I think we're good for questions. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, no, this has been really great because it's it's I haven't talked to you, like in depth about
Mm.
this. So for me, it's a really
Surprise.
I'm yeah, I know. For me, it's yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, it's just it's a I don't know. I guess on a selfish matter, it's just like I like connecting with people like this. I like like
Mm.
it's
Thank you.
and I would prefer yeah I'd prefer to be able to do it in person, of course, but doing it online like this, then we can have everybody share as well. And yeah,
Totally.
yeah, it's an interesting sort of new-ish world that we live in. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your approaches and like your background and like what you're currently working on, and yeah, just being open to basically help out and yeah, spread your experiences, and hopefully the people that are in the chat, I guess what I can say is like, yeah, how do we reach you? How do we connect you as the audience? How do we get a hold of you if you we have questions after this?
You can really connect with me through my Instagram. People
Mm-hmm.
DM me, I answer. So
Mm-hmm.
that's at Briga Music. If not, if you go on my website, I think did you put the Twitter? No, the Linktree link
I
somewhere?
did, yeah, on the
Maybe.
Twitter one, I did do that. We can put
Yeah,
that in the chat too, just to
yeah.
have it there.
Okay, I'm just gonna do it right now. But yeah, if anybody is looking to get a hold of me, and please, like anytime, it's such a pleasure to just meet new people and stuff. You can just go to my link tree. It pretty much has everything, like all the different platforms that I'm part of and that I do, all the things that I do are in there. And then in there, there's different ways to contact me, either through my website. Honestly, Instagram, whatever. It works,
Mm-hmm.
So I do check my inbox on Instagram. So
Cool. Well, that's
yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
And thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure just to chat, really
Oh, thank
enjoying
you.
it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like I said before, it's great to have you be part of the school, and I'm very glad that you agreed to this. And thanks so much for everybody that's been tuning in our
Yeah, thank you so
live
much
studio
for
audience. Well,
coming.
they're all there, and and yes, thanks.
There's the sound effect.
Exactly. So, yep, you can. Well, what I'll do is hopefully have a video recording of this, and I'll put it out for people that weren't able to attend. And once again, this is brought to you by the School of Video Game Audio. This is our Discord, and hopefully, this has been a fun and exciting session for you. And I'll try to continue to do these things. They take a bit of time to set up, but at the same time, people have been really interested in hearing more. So if you do want to hear more, then just similarly contact the school through us, online SoVGA.com or through Twitter, and yeah, we'll go with that. So yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.